Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks. I am your host, Carolyn Hines, and as you know, this is a podcast slash YouTube channel where I talk to film creatives about their work, their time in the industry, and what inspires them as artists. And today I am joined by filmmaker Savita Singh to discuss her new short film, Shadowbird, Sonsi, the term in Indian. And I'm very excited to talk to her about this film because as a cinematographer, like she has a very special eye, I think, of capturing her stories. And this is one film that I think anyone who enjoys visualism and stories and how stories are told visually would enjoy this short film. So before we begin, as usual, I'd like to have my guests say a bit about themselves or what inspires them and inspired their work. So Savita, what can you tell the audience about yourself and what inspired you and what got you into filmmaking?
Hi, I'm so glad to be here on your podcast, and I really enjoyed the chat we just had before we started recording. This is Savita Singh. I'm a filmmaker and a cinematographer based out of Mumbai, India. I've been primarily working as a cinematographer in the Mumbai industry and the experimental indie space for about 14 years now. And this is my first film as a writer-director. Also, I've shot it. So I'm so glad to be talking to you about the film, and thank you for saying such lovely things about the film.
Thank you. So like you mentioned before we were chatting before we started, you said you were a critic and a journalist. I want to ask you about the transition from doing film criticism and journalism into becoming a cinematographer, because that's what you primarily started out as. What was that transition like and what inspired the change?
So when I was studying in college for my degree course, which was a mass communication course, I was interning with a newspaper, a very lovely newspaper called The Statesman. And I started initially with the crime beat and stuff, but just didn't go down well with me at that age. I just found it too difficult to digest. So I was always into films as a child. Like I grew up watching a lot of films from filmmakers such as Godard or Kurosawa or the progressive Indian filmmakers. So it was only natural for me to maybe, seek a position in the features desk. And I was invited by my features editor to come and write stories about film. They gave me one article to write about films. I did well. And then gradually I was reviewing films, initially English and then Hindi. And that was really life-changing for me because back then in early 2000, we didn't have like so much access to cinema how we have it now, right? So I could go to the embassies and watch retrospectives of so many directors, and I got to see such stunning films from across the world because of the nature of my job. So yeah, so that happened for 2-3 years, and then I applied for a 3-year cinematography course at Film and Television Institute of India. And I was fortunate that I got through. It's the oldest and one of the most prestigious film schools in the country. And that is where I can say that I truly found my expression and that, cinematography was my calling. And that's how the journey started.
Do you think that your experience as a writer actually helped you as a cinematographer? Because with writing, you have to be able to express yourself in a different format from verbal speech. And as a cinematographer, like you were doing the same thing because you're telling the story by showing the landscape and through the lighting of the film and the characters. So do you think that helped with your transition and made you understand the medium better?
Yes, of course, because writing for a newspaper, you have to be very, very careful about the use of and the number and the position of words you use, and everything has a certain weight. So that kind of editing, sub-editing a copy and writing it, presenting it, it taught me how to articulate my thought and how to sum them up and correctly project them to the reader or the audience. So that was really helpful. And but I still didn't think that I could, write my own stories. But when I held the camera in my hand for the first time back then, I really thought that I could express so much better because I was a visual person and I had this tool to say what I wanted to say. And it was only like over the years that I slowly grew a way of also putting my stories down on paper and then to bring them alive using the strength of my camera, and also the way I was engaging with stories right from the start as a child. So yeah, all the things came together eventually, I feel.
No, I think it did because like this film is as I said, like everyone who's seen these know that I always say the same thing, but it's true. I'm a very visual person, so I like to pay attention to details, and this film is, as a short film, it's only about 20 minutes long, but it does give a I like how we get an aspect of Korea of Indian culture, and with regards to not only the storytelling and how stories are told in Indian culture, because every culture around the world, every country has its own way of telling stories, has its own way of relating its history through its stories. And you do that in this film because I think the film actually has, is the way I'm seeing it, technically three stories being told at the same time. There is the story of Sonsi, of the songbird. Then there's the story of Nadi and her relationship to her father and her and the timekeeper. And then there's another story that's being told to her of the warrior bird that was killed by the king. So the film itself tells like three different, to me, stories of Indian culture. So I want us to talk a bit about that, about using the film to tell three specific stories or just in stories in general. So could you tell me about the stories, that why you picked these stories, especially the story of Nadi and the timekeeper and Sonsi?
So it's just developed in a very abstract yet a random way. Like there were so many stories that I had. I was writing a film about a girl, a young girl who maybe could be the saddest girl on this earth. She had a cat. And then I realized the cat is not really doing justice to the sadness to bring out that. And then it became a cloud over her head, and then it transformed into a shadow word somewhere down the line. And then when I retrospective, I realized that these were stories which were so much a part of my childhood, so they somewhere just found their way, and they kept changing shapes. And timekeeper, again, a character who I'd heard of in the older days. Like there used to be people who used to come and fix clocks, old antique clocks. So this was a profession. And I'm really fascinated with how older technologies, older methods are and older professions are slowly dying because of advent of technology. And I somehow find a lot of intrigue with the past, which is how you can read a civilization by the way it lived a certain way in the past. So that really intrigues me. So there were many things. So like, for example, the film has a very folklore, fable-like quality. It's about myths, it's about legends. I kind of call it a film fable that, I like to call my film a film fable. So it's pretty much a story which I wove. There are some references to some real fables, real myths. For example, the warrior bird Jatayu, which is a character out of Ramayana. And in our in India, myths and folklores and things like Ramayana and Mahabharata, they're not really. They are a part of our personal history. We grew up listening to these stories from our grandmoms and our dads and mothers, and these references would just seep in conversations. And so it doesn't seem like a religious text or a mythology which was written years ago. It just sounds like a part of your personal history. So I was trying to make a film which was about remembrance, about melancholy, about childhood, the loss of it and finding it back, about the memory of it, about evoking it through folklores that I kind of built on my own, and wove a character called Timekeeper. So there were so many more references, and I was basically trying to tell the story with a lens. I started with this one sentence in my head, which said, the memory of my childhood was purer than my childhood. So this is something which I was trying to evoke, like every time we look back at our childhood, I think the story of a childhood or any individual's life is pretty much the story of their entire family, clan, village, generation, civilization, country. You can't separate them. So, and when you look back at your childhood or you look back at the memories, you remember it with a lens of romanticism. You kind of make it bigger than what it was, and or sometimes sadder than what it was, and it's cathartic in many many ways. So that happens. So all of these things were like coming together, and that's how this complex spiral structure. And you very interestingly said that there are three stories which are happening. So the film is basically about a little girl, 8-year-old Nadi, who's in this state of dream and awake. It's like that VR of morning when you're asleep and you're awake, you're conscious and you're unconscious. And in that little time, how you weave a spell of dream. And it's basically about her quest to find her shadow bird, which goes missing, and how this mystical character, Timekeeper, helps her find it. And it's set in this village, which is again, it's something which could exist inside her head, or it could be real, or it could not be real. It's a village where it's not stopped raining forever because of, again, the myth of Jatayu. It's a village which is stuck in a time warp, a time bubble. And it seems like there is no human imprint apart from the few figures that we see. So I was just trying to build a very dreamlike state, and it happens in many, many timelines. Like it's her in the real present morning when she's sleeping. It's her in her own dream. It's the older Nadi who's narrating the story. So it's also like present and past. It's in her head. There is a story between her, the shadow bird, and the Timekeeper. Then there is her recollections of the loss of, the father leaving, the sadness of her mother transforming into her own internal sadness. So it's like so many things happening together. So yeah.
So one of the things that I'm really interested in is the concept of time in this, because as you mentioned, a lot of it takes place in between spaces, like in between being awake and being asleep, and it takes place in the past and the present. And the like talking about the use of the old clocks, like the clocks with like the oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on what you call it, but the ones where it swings and like yes, thank you, pendulum. And I'm really interested in it because the story of Jatanu, like because he's killed and he dies on the forest floor, rain starts falling and it never stops in this village. Like it's a place of constant rain and moisture and wetness, and like the village, like all the ruins are covered by moss and like covered by ferns because it's a moist atmosphere. But then talking about time, like I kind of saw it as a consequence because like they're stuck in this loop where like time doesn't seem to flow. And I want to ask you, there's a particular scene that I really thought was an interesting way to talk about the concept of time, and that's when the Timekeeper, he's walking along this path, and this is where the story is talking about he was basically punished for throwing the keys to the watchtower in the river, and it talks about he arrives before time does. So he time follows him. And what I thought was interesting what I seen is that you follow him to a certain point, he keeps walking and the camera goes back and starts following the path that he does. I want to ask you about how you actually use your camera work to describe the concept of time. So I want to ask you about that scene in particular, because I was like, so he's the one who pulls time along. Time follows him, he doesn't follow time.
Yes, that's a very, very interesting question, actually. So, I mean, I've been always very fascinated with how time works, because like Nadi, I have woken up almost all my life, even as a child, even today, with a dream. And so many times the dream almost seemed real, like I wake up from a dream and think it actually just happened. And so that always, that memory stays. So it started from there. And I wanted to, so again, the concept of time comes from this basic idea. I wanted to keep everything very childlike. I did not want to philosophize or intellectualize anything, because a child's world is like that. That's the beauty of a child's mind, that they don't have to complicate things, and yet they understand the deepest of meanings of life and existence. And that's why maybe they're just such happy beings and more complete. So when in your dream, like a 10-second span could mean a lifetime. And which is so true in terms of science, space, science fictions, and it also manifests in your dreams. So time, we all experience time in that sense. Like if somebody is kind of going through, say for example, if someone's on their deathbed, they'd see their whole life flash in front of their eyes in fractions of seconds. So the girl for me was still the saddest girl, who seems to be, it might be just a regular morning of her life, or she might just be on her deathbed. It could mean so many things. And how her entire life or dreams or things, her inner fears, melancholy, they're all manifesting in that little fraction of few seconds. And Timekeeper is a metaphor for time. And I hope, like how a child's mind, you blow everything out of proportions. So when you say that he was the time, a child, when you say the cloud burst, we know that it meant that it may rain, and there was a scientific reason for it. A child would actually imagine a cloud burst. It's as simple as that. So this particular shot that you're talking about, that we are explaining that Timekeeper would walk ahead and time would follow him. So camera walks with the Timekeeper, and as he exits the frame, we track back and we come back to the empty space, and we walk again. Because it's as simple as that, the time, I'm walking with the time and you can't see it. Now it's nothing. I don't think it's any more deep than what it seems, but I think the deepest of things are as simple as that. So how an absurd thought, which may seem or sound absurd to us, is the most natural way for a child to look at. So that was basically the lens. And I did not want to intellectualize time, so I like kind of made it very literal. That Timekeeper, when he was a kid, he lost the important part of the village clock tower, and now the village won't wake up on time. So the elders punished him, and they said that from today it's your job to run the time, because the clock tower doesn't work. So he became the Timekeeper, the person who would take care of time. Now, these are all very childlike ways of saying. I mean, it could mean that he's actually the Timekeeper or not. So I was just playing with these very childlike ideas, but they would have deeper meanings. But I did not want to go into that kind of philosophizing it. I just wanted to keep it very natural and childlike. But everything is laden with this very doom-like, gray, hazy atmosphere and melancholy and moss, because I don't think it's, I did not want to make a very happy child film, because maybe as an adult, I was also questioning the whole idea of existence and trying to relook at my childhood or us. So that just seemed like what I was feeling at that particular time. So that's how it all kind of fell in one place.
Yeah, it is kind of melancholy because of the location, because everything is so moist, it's so wet, and it's like so filled with mist and fog. It's very it's not depressive, but it's very it does help with the dreamlike state, but it could also be just like you're just thinking like my mind is just so clouded, and that's kind of like how a lot of people like with like cognitive impairment and like me kind of see, like that's how the experience kind of is, like things are just foggy. But like there's very particular scenes where light does come in, and a lot of the light I want you to talk about, like from your perspective again as a cinematographer, is the use of light, because the film overall is just very hazy. It has a very hazy feel to it. Like there's only specific scenes where light shines directly on the characters. Like for instance, like when Nadi wakes up, she's walking around, she's looking up, and like the light comes through, and like it kind of like shines on her, kind of like a halo, but it's not like direct sunlight. And then the other main source of light is from the shadow box, where the story of the shadow bird is being told from inside the shadow box. That's like the only really the only few scenes we get like light shining directly on the character's face, or just coming from like backlight. So just can you talk about the use of light is for specific scenes because it's not present every time.
Right. So, like I said, that I wanted to create a world for this 8-year-old little girl, Nadi, who is, for me, a very melancholic child. And Timekeeper, again, a much older guy, but seems like lost and with no friends. And we don't know. He's just mysterious. But for me, like, they are the same people. She is an 8-year-old, but and much more older in her head, and he's a maybe 60-year-old and a child. So they're like, two sides of the same coin, living in the same sense of confusion and loss. And Shadowbird is the only light or warmth in their lives. And Shadowbird is also, so every time you see the Shadowbird, it's golden, backlit, warm, nowhere else in their worlds. And every time she remembers her mother or the father, they are also warm, sunny. So, I mean, that's how we remember memories with warmth. And so a sense of gold, yellow, warm, that palette, that color palette evokes a sense of, like a very cozy, secure, warm world for the child. And when vis-a-vis the rest of the film is grays and greens and hazy, overcast, with no sunlight, and seems foggy and cold. And so it kind of helps to achieve that state of mind that I wanted both these characters to have. So I carefully found and coded the locations with those colors, even in interior spaces. And that also was one of the biggest reason that I decided to shoot it in the rains, the monsoons. So where we shot, which is Maharashtra, Mumbai, we shot close to Pune. It's the season when it rains for like 3-4 months, and the landscape transforms, and immense amount of moss and fog and rain happens. So and there's no sunlight, so it automatically lends to the landscape of the film. So that decision was very clear in my head that I wanted to shoot in the rain. So when I could not shoot it a particular year, I waited for a year for that atmosphere to arrive. And also it's pretty for an indie film, when you have a small crew, less money, to shoot in middle of rains when the conditions are not very conducive is not really a great idea. But there was no other way that I could achieve this look. So we just took a leap of faith and said that let's just hope that the rain gods will support us, and they kind of did. So when we wanted the fog, it would fog. When we wanted no rain, it would magically not rain. So we just went with a childlike conviction, and it worked in our case. Yeah.
Mm. So now you're talking about the rain and the location, which is perfect because I wanted to talk about that because this location is beautiful. Like, and like I think you display that so well in the film because like you use a lot of drone footage to show like the above the canopy of the trees and the building, and you get a scope of the size of this building where Nadi and her father, like, and we see her father, her grandmother, and her mother, and the timekeeper. We're seeing them walking around, and you get a scope. Like from the inside, you can't really tell how tall or how big this building is. But when you get outside, you see how big it is. But then you see how moss covered and how overtaken it is by the rainforest. Like the forest is reclaiming the property. So I want to talk a bit about the challenges of filming, not only as you said in monsoon season, but the location itself, because I imagine it couldn't have been easy, like carting the equipment around this location because like it's wet. So like wet moisture brings challenges for filmmakers in general. So can you just talk about the challenges of filming in this location, and also like what was the challenge, but also as you talked about the fog and the rain stopping just when you needed it to stop. So can you go into that a bit more?
Sure. So, I mean, like I said, that we already knew that we're getting into a situation where it will rain. So we were kind of mentally prepared for that. So we knew that we will lose some time in terms of the amount of number of shots we could take. So I mean, I back worked, and I would just tell myself that I won't have full 8 hours. I may just get 6, but I'll have to work in that, because what that time of year offers, that's irreplaceable. Because no amount of VFX or sets or production design can achieve what nature can. So that was a given. So so the biggest challenge was to find those locations, because I obviously can't create them. So it took me a long, long time, because it's not. It may look very exotic in this place with no human imprint, but there's a lot of deforestation. There's a lot of development, and it's find spaces where there are jungles and vast expanse, or like something as small as that I wanted a window with overlooking a tree, an old window overlooking a tree, and no other houses or civilization behind it. That became quite a challenge, and I just wanted that image, very central tableau miniature painting like image, where a tree, a beautiful tree with branching out, is positioned inside a window frame. So we went around looking many houses. Eventually we found it in an old temple, and the boundary or the backyard of the temple was owned by some trust, and hence there was no development there. So it took me like over 2 years. Every monsoon I would go, and like 3 months of just scouting, or even to find trees which were crooked and filled with moss, because the region I was shooting in, there are no forests left. So again, this was some temple property, which, because there is a holy shrine, so the trees weren't cut. And I just had 15 odd trees, and I just shot it with wide lensing and up and close and low angle to make it seem like a big mystical jungle. I just had 15 trees, and everywhere else around it was not so jungle like. Shooting in the fog, like, of course it happens that the lens would fog up many a times, and so we took care of that, and we had rain covers, and it was very difficult for the actors also, because they'd get wet, so I had double clothes ready. But everybody enjoyed it, and I mean, I did not push. We shot for 8 days, which I think is a comfortable time to shoot a 25-minute film. So that ways we did not want to push the crew. We wanted them to rest and shoot with a sense of calm, because that was so important to have in every frame for me, that I did not want that sense of struggle to appear on anyone's face or subconscious indirectly also. So there, I think my producers were also very supportive, and we got to shoot it with a lot of, I would say, leisure. Like, I did not feel pressure while shooting it. So I think that was the most important thing. Yeah.
No, I agree, because I think it does, and it does carry over into the performances, because especially for Nadi, she's supposed to be, as you said, in a dream stage. So she's like filled. She's a little girl. She's filled with wonder. So she's supposed to look like relaxed and more like enthralled with her surroundings, and more amazed about everything that she's seeing and experiences. So I think, like, and that's one of the things that's always interested me about filmmaking and acting, and like how the atmosphere of the set can affect the performance that the director and the actors are trying to get. Because like, sometimes you can tell watching a film or a TV show, like you can tell when someone is just like on the edge of feeling frenzied or something when they're trying to do performance. Like I was telling I said recently, I told someone recently, like, I love when I look at films and I can tell that the cast had fun while they were making it, because they're just like so into the performance, and they're just enjoying the dialogue. And for this, you can tell like they're relaxed, because they're supposed to be in this world where time doesn't really exist. So they're not hurried. They're not concerned with what has to happen in the next hour. They're not concerned with where they have to go. So you do get that sense of, like, especially for the timekeeper, I think he's interesting. Like, he's just this old man, and he just like has this very curious and also very mischievous look on his face. So
Yeah.
can you just talk to me about finding your cast and finding the performance to play these characters?
Yeah, so I mean, both Nadi, Arohi Radhakrishnan, this super talented. Back then she was 8, now she's almost 10. So finding her was a huge task because like to find a child who is not very animated and with doesn't have that extra energy, which is beautiful about children. But in this case, I wanted the child to be very like calm and express through her eyes. And I mean, I didn't want her to look stereotypically sad and melancholic. Like she has a calm about her, but still there is her entire persona drips of like she has years of wisdom and she's seen the world. So I wanted that, and so we found auditioned many children in Pune, in Bombay. We went to schools, we went to theater groups. We also casted out of kids who were working already in the industry. So I didn't find Nadi anywhere, but eventually a friend of mine who helped me cast her is a casting director, Malhar. He introduced me to her, and she'd done a couple of advertisements. So and I had this vision of Nadi, like I wanted her to look and feel just like my little niece. And she was surprisingly a splitting image of her, and even in personality. I wanted a child who was so in Indian conventional standards of a child or beauty or that picture perfect, because it's a fable. So I wanted everything to be picture perfect in my sense of world. So, but I did not want to cast like a very fair skinned, conventionally, how Indians have this obsession with fair skin. So I always saw a dusky girl with big eyes and a calm persona and two big pigtails and ponytails. So Nadi, I mean, we auditioned her and I instantly connected with her. In case of Timekeeper, the minute I imagined this character, there was only one person whom I thought of, that is Jameel Khan. He's a very old friend. We've known each other for 15 years now. And he's a phenomenal actor, a theater actor. I mean, he looks like 60, but he's actually just 42, 43. So we did a lot of makeup on him and he grew his beard and he worked on his body language. So he's a stunning theater actor. He's done a lot of films. In fact, just 2 days back, he won the best actor Filmfare Award, which is like the highest award in the country. And he's done films like Gangs of Wasipur, which is a cult, and Lions of Punjab, and tons of work. So, but despite all that experience and everything else, like when I told him that I'm making a film and like it's not a conventional story. So I don't know if you'd be interested because there won't be much dialogues for you. You'd be more of your body language and your presence. So, but he trusted me and he said, I'm completely in. I'm sure you'll do something interesting. So this was also a very different experience for him. And I did not tell, I mean, I shared the script with Nadi because for me, she's the wise one. And for me, he's the child. So I told her the whole story and she understood all the plot points. She immediately took to it. I asked her to narrate it back to me. She did that beautifully. But in case of Jameel Khan, who's a far more senior actor, who's used to doing Shakespeare, to all kinds of interesting works, I told him that, would it be okay if I do not give you the script and we just talk about your character, your backstory, and then I just want you to be in the character and we'll just improvise as we go. So we spoke a lot about his character, about his the way he is. He did a lot of look tests. He had a lot of conversations, but we had this thing that we'll not work on an idea of a script because I didn't want him to become. I wanted him to be vulnerable, basically. So and he's so learned that and such a fine actor that like I mean he would have just got that sharp performance. I don't know. And I wanted a little bit of chaos in his personality, like he's lost So and I'm so grateful that he allowed me that. And he said, as long as between the two of us, one of us knows what's happening, I'm fine with it. So completely trusted me with it. And he also recently our film won at the Lady Filmmakers Film Festival, and he got the best supporting actor. So that was also very special, and I'm so glad that people, it's interesting to see when your film or your work or cuts across cultures and reaches a very, very different audience who may not really completely absorb the little nuances of culture, but still it cuts across, and the language of cinema is able to speak through. So that's lovely.
No, it is. And like first, congrats to him. I think you said that you didn't show him the script, which I think was very interesting. But then as you were talking, I kind of thought about how that actually was a very genius move, because considering the type of story you're telling, I could see a more experienced actor, especially one that you said who does like Shakespeare and does plays very deep roles, could become too focused on the details, on the minutia of the story, and just be like, "Tell me more. I need to know more about what you're telling me." But if you don't if you just give him like the broad strokes, you're like, "This is you're going in the forest. You're a man who's in charge of time, and you're kind of childlike." That's it. I can see how that would actually work, because like him being curious about what's happening plays perfectly into the character, because this character has a very sense of curiosity and, like, as I said, mischievousness. And I think him knowing nothing kind of makes perfect sense. And I like applaud you for not telling him anything, because I think that was genius.
Thank you.
Actually.
I hope he still feels the same and doesn't hate me for it.
No, absolutely. We talked a bit about the cinematography and the acting. I want to talk about the sound design. I love the sound design for this because it's very layered. So when I first watched, I was listening with my headphones, and I'm like, and I would recommend anyone, if you're watching this on the laptop, if you're gonna get to watch the film, I would say if you can use headphones, because the sound design is very layered in this for this film. Like there's you hear the immediate audio, but then there's like the rain. You can hear the sound of the rain always falling in the background. Like the rain doesn't really stop when I was listening, and like it sounds and then there's the sound of like water dripping, and then there's the sound of the pendulum. And like it kind of made me think that with water dripping could be a symbol of time again, seconds counting down, and then there's the sound of the pendulum like swishing. And it's not like a very loud song, it's like very subtle, and it comes and goes. So can you just talk about working with your sound designer on building the audio landscape of this film?
So I basically I was very fortunate that I had some of my oldest friends and very, very talented people who worked on this film. So the film, the way it sounds and everything else is all credit to them and what they brought to it. We're also friends. We have known each other for a long time. So in this case, he's my batchmate from film school, Ajit Singh Rathod, and we had done our thesis film together, which is also kind of very in that sense it did very well in the festivals, and it's an experimental film, and we both received national film awards for that film. So our journey of collaboration started way back in 2007, and we come from similar backgrounds, and we've known each other for so many years. So when we say let's put a bird as a call for of longing, we know what we mean. There are a million birds, but we know when I say water droplet, there are so many samples and so many kinds of it, but we know what kind of a droplet and what echo, what reverb. So since we have grown together, there wasn't much to communicate, and Ajit gave a lot of time to the film very lovingly, and like he treated each and every scene with little details and layers. And so and we were trying to recreate, like for example, the image is trying to create a world which is a fable-like dreamscape, a landscape which exists in a timeless zone, which is with hints of architecture, sculptures, temple domes, moss, decay, melancholy, mysticism, fog, so many things. And in middle of this landscape, there are these characters who inhabit it, and they seem like they're floating. They're in a space like that. So like how we achieved it visually with fog and rain and the color palettes, and similarly in sound design, small little but very consciously taken decisions. Like for example, a lot of times you'll see that the characters are walking, but there are no footsteps, so it seems like they're floating. It seems like a dream suddenly. So it's very the first instinct is to put the footstep. So also like we wanted to use sounds which were from an era gone by, like if you hear a particular gong of a bell, you would remember the years of your childhood when you would hear that clock tower, which now I think at most places they stopped working, or the sound of the pigeons in an empty house, which nobody inhabits now, or things like that, typewriter, the sounds of little spare parts of clock. And clock is also a metaphor for so many things. It's a metaphor for time. It's a metaphor for concentric stories happening together. It's a metaphor for how the brain is decoding something. So sounds were used very, again, sounds were, we went back to our nostalgia of childhood and we tried to evoke it with use of sound. So Jimmy and Anmol Bhave, who did a brilliant job at mixing it, they just found that little texture of creating that time which has gone by. And I mean, and my effort was to create a time which could mean childhood for any age. Like it could be the same for my grandmom, for me, or maybe a kid watching today, because we don't know what time span we are talking about, but we're talking about a place which exists in a limbo. And yeah, so I guess that's how we went about it.
What you're saying actually kind of ties into something that you said before, at the beginning, where we're talking about time and like with progression of time went with technology, because you were talking about how we don't really use like those old clocks anymore. Like unless you go into a house with like a grandparent, or you have like an auntie, or people who collect antiques, you won't find like those tall bookcase types of clocks anymore. Or like my grandmother had like a cuckoo clock on her wall,
Wow,
and
yeah.
like go into most houses, you don't see like those kind of clocks anymore. And it kind of made me think about how, as a filmmaker and as a cinematographer, technology has allowed you to be able to tell stories of time goes past. Like as a society, we advance, we're able to tell stories better because of technology. But it's kind of like sad where the only time we get to tell these kind of stories about days gone by is through film. And it kind of makes you think of the things that we lose because of time. But then also as women, I think, especially women of color, like because of progression of time, we're able to do these kind of jobs. Like before, years ago, we wouldn't have been able to do the jobs that we're doing now. So I want to talk to you a bit about that, about working as a filmmaker today and being able to do what you're able to do because of how time has progressed and how our society has progressed. But then using your work to tell stories of like maybe parts of your culture that you think you maybe like your society may be losing touch with.
Yes, that's a very interesting question. Yes, of course, I've seen that change happen since the time I started working in this particular industry. Of course, as a child, I've seen how women or girl children were treated. There was always a difference, girls are not supposed to laugh loudly, girls are not supposed to wear certain clothes, girls are supposed to behave a certain way, which was never the case with men. And every time I've spent time with my friends from films from other countries, I found that the themes were not very different everywhere. It was pretty much the degree of expression would vary, but it was there, always there. So I think that normalization has happened now. So when I started working in the industry here in Mumbai back in 2008, there were hardly any women cinematographers. working at that time, except two of my seniors who were also largely doing advertisements. So, so when I started, I think it was a big shock or a new thing for a lot of people on the crew. You know, they were not used to it, and so there was some bit of an element of surprise or question or disbelief. So, you know, like a crew has so many hierarchies and layers of people, and you're supposed to work with all of them together. And it's such a teamwork that if your entire team doesn't believe in you, your job becomes so much more tougher. So, so back then it was a task of making people believe or to take that leadership position in a non-threatening way and still assert your point. It was quite a task, but over the years it has changed, and now I see on a set it's not so difficult for so many people in the crew to take maybe orders from a woman. You know, it's so the society is changing and people's mindsets are changing. More and more women are coming in. Like I told you, when I started working, there were hardly any. And as time passed, a few of us who were working at that time, we spoke and we started this collective called IWCC, Indian Women Cinematographers Collective. And the idea was to bring, showcase the brilliance of work of Indian origin women cinematographers, to celebrate their work, to create a place for everyone to unite and to talk about their challenges, their struggles, their triumphs, to everything. So it was just this umbrella where everybody could come and discuss and ask any question, kind of a safe space. And back then when we started 4 years back, they were like 30, 40, and now it's almost a body of 120 women, and everybody's doing great and it's doing beautifully. And so I've seen that change happen in front of my eyes, and more and more women are coming in, and more and more women writers, directors, editors, sound designers are coming in, and it's really having a impact on the kind of stories told also, because I think for the longest time we were listening to a very one-sided perspective or a one-sided narrative. And like I think it's time now to restore that balance or to create that equilibrium where you're able to hear women look at the world with a different sensitivity. They have a different gaze. They have their own organic way of seeing or telling their own ideas of human resilience, spirit, faith. So I think we need to hear those perspectives a lot more now. So, and I'm glad that it started happening in a big way, and also here, also everywhere else. Though it still seems like a long way to go. I mean, it's overwhelming to see women doing well, but I still feel it's a long way. But it's a good start.
It's always good to have just start, because like this industry, the filmmaking industry, whether you're whether you're a director, a cinematographer, editor, or even like myself, a journalist or a critic, like as women and as women of color, this particular industry, the film industry, is one where like we talk a lot about gatekeeping and like the need for representation, because like being coming from our own personal perspectives, like that does give us the opportunity to tell stories from our perspective, because you can't have just one type of people telling all of these multiple stories, because eventually the stories will all get told the same way, even if it's like, you know what I mean, like even if you can have one director who does like horror, action, drama, whatever, but when you look at the films, like you can tell that it's the same person making them, because everyone has their own kind of like stamp, or their own like their DNA that runs through their films. And I think for the film industry to get better, to grow and to progress, because especially for the young people growing up now who will be watching these stories, like they need to be able to see stories coming from a different perspective. They need to see the different DNA running through the film industry. So I think it's fantastic that you have like creators like you, and you have the collective that you formed, because like women do need spaces, safe spaces, where they can talk about their work and talk about their experiences. And I think being able to talk about them does help, I think, with the creative process, because that's how as you're able to talk about it, you're able to grow and you're able to get realizations and share, and you're able to like tell your stories differently in the future than you would have told them in the past. So I like applause to you and like to everyone in your and to everyone that you work with, because um Indian, I don't think a lot of people, like Indian films, like especially the Indian music and like style of telling stories influences Western filmmaking a lot more than I think a lot of people realize, especially like in the music and like even in pop culture. Like there was someone who did a breakdown of Britney Spears' song Poison, and he was using a track from an Indian from a film. Like it was a film from, I think it was like the 40s. And people were like, oh, like this is a piece. He's like, no, you need to understand, like people borrow from different cultures, whether it's music or film. And I think and that helps to tell better stories. And so that we need like more filmmakers like you to have like to show the different ways that stories could be told. Because I don't think if you took your script and give it to and someone give it to another director, it would be told the same way. It wouldn't be like you have your own sensibilities of telling the story.
That's, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like everybody has a different take on things, and we need to encourage more voices. And when I say more voices, it's not just women. We need to get more perspectives, more cultures, more races, people from different minorities, people from different backgrounds. I mean, I think it's happening, and I'm glad that there are so many people who are also supportive of it. That there are so many people who I know personally who were not cognizant of this earlier, and they have like they accepted that maybe we were just blind to kind of partiality or inequality that we were subconsciously maybe doing, and they're so much more aware of it now, and they're trying to be take a stand and trying to be more aware of different this kinds of perspectives. So yeah.
So I think this is where we're at, because I think this is a perfect place. I want the best for you, because I know I think Catherine told me like this is being considered for the Oscar category for best shorts.
Yes.
I wish all the best to you and to your team, because I think the film is beautiful, and to everyone who worked on it, applause to everyone. To the entire
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you liked the film, and we just wanted to reach the maximum number of people, and it's made with a lot of love, with a set of talented crew and cast, and it evokes a certain kind of image of India, which I feel I was trying to project, which I think we don't generally see. So I just can't wait to bring it to people, and we only hope that we move forward in our journey of this Oscar shorts. And thank you so much for speaking to me, and this was such a stimulating conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for talking to me. Is there a way that people will be able to see? Because I know right now it's only available, I think, for selected screenings for like press and journalists. Is there a way that it will be available for the public to screen it soon?
So yes, we did not want to put it on our platform till the time our festival rounds were over. So as of now, since it's still in consideration, but the trailer of the film is available. Maybe if you could leave a link here, people could watch it. You could read more about the film. We have an Instagram page, Sonsi Shadowbird. You could, and we hope to put it up on a platform very soon. So that conversation is going on, and the festivals are still happening. So slow journey, but it's happening.
I know festival season can take a lot. Sunday's festival season seems like it takes forever. And then as soon as this, and then you're like, wait, that was it. And then you got to prepare for it all over again.
The whole pandemic thing, just stretched it. And I'm so we went to so many festivals. The film went to so many festivals, but I, as a filmmaker, has not attended a single real screening, So it's heartbreaking, and I'm really hoping that, I could show it to an audience in person. It's been online screenings and there have been a couple of festivals abroad, but we could not travel. So that has also been a bummer, but hopefully very soon it should reach more people.
Yeah, the last 2 years, I always say time is like a flat circle. Time means nothing. Talking about Sunbird and how time is used in the film, time in real life with this pandemic means nothing because like 20, I don't understand how we're at the end of 2021 already. It was just New Year's, but somehow we're here already. It means again, thank you so much for talking with me, Savita. This has been a great conversation and taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a ton.
So everyone, thank you for listening to this episode of Carolyn Talks, and with me, your host, Carolyn. And today was joined by cinematographer and director and writer, Savita Singh, to talk about her short film, Shadowbird, Sonsi. This was such a great conversation. I appreciate Savita taking the time to speak with me about her film and about her work in the film industry in India and the work that she and the collective are doing there. And just about the process of this film, because I think it's a very interesting film visually. It's like, as she said, it's not a lot of dialogue, but it does, I think, tell so much of the story visually, which, me, as you guys, if you know me, know that I love. So I appreciate her taking the time to speak with me. And you can find other episodes of Carolyn Talks on the podcast.com, as well as under the So Here's What Happened podcast. You can find those links on SoundCloud, as well as Spotify and other podcast streaming sites, as well as Acast. And you can find the YouTube version of this if you want to see us chatting on my YouTube channel under my name, Carolyn Hines. That's CarolynHinds. You can listen to my podcast, Beyond the Romance, where I talk about Asian dramas. I do recaps. I do special episodes where I'm joined by a fellow drama fan and friends to talk about their favorite dramas. You can find my recaps for the weekly dramas that I've watched or that I'm currently watching or have recently watched, as well as my interviews that I do for that with the African American Film Critics Association, virtual roundtables, where we interview people like Calvin Harrison Jr. for his film Serrano. We've spoken to the cast of the Amazon Prime comedy series Harlem. We've spoken to some amazing people over the last 2 years. I can't believe I'm saying this because the pandemic has lasted 2 years. But it's been a great 2 years. I appreciate working with AFCA. I love working with the team and being able to speak to Black creatives in the film and television industry. And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at CarrieCNH, CarrieCNH12. Follow my hashtags Dramas with Carries, where I tweet the shows that I'm currently watching, or Sundays occasionally films, as well as Saturday Night Sci-Fi, where I am a co-host, and my Saturday Night Sci-Fi piece we tweet our film or TV show of the night every Saturday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. And until the next episode of Carolyn Talks, everyone, please stay safe.